Hello and happy opening night. Welcome to the RotoWire WNBA show where we talk about fantasy basketball. I'm Jason Shebilske alongside Kirien Sprecher. Today we'll discuss some of our bold predictions for this year's WNBA season. We'll also analyze some of the early season absences around the league and how they could impact fantasy. And finally, we'll offer some picks for our champions and award winners this year. Those looking to subscribe to RotoWire can use the promo code ROTO15 at checkout for 15% off any RotoWire product. RotoWire will have more WNBA content this season than ever before, and we also have plenty of exciting fantasy football and fantasy baseball content to explore and more. So even if you're just a fan of the WNBA, it's a great way to see trends and statistics and more and see how things might shake out around the league. During today's show, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments and we'll get them answered. If you ask live, we'll get them answered on the show, but we'll also be active in the comments afterward to provide any additional insight. And we're happy to answer any questions on social media. I'm at Jason Shebilske everywhere, and Kirien is at Kirien Sprecher RW. So at the start of the season in any sport, it's fun to dream big and make some lofty predictions. Kieran, what's one far-fetched thing that you think could happen in the 2025 WNBA season?
All right, I'm rolling with Angel Reese will receive multiple third place or higher votes for MVP. Notably, she got one fourth place vote last year as a rookie. So I'm hoping that I can count on that reporter to, maybe get a third place vote this year. So we already got one. We just need one more or a couple more players to hop on. I think this is within the realm of possibility, right? Obviously, this shouldn't be an expectation for Reese, but I think she easily leads the league in rebounds. I'm expecting a slight uptick in offensive efficiency and her playmaking assists. And then if she does that, I think the sky added enough pieces. Marina, you look at the leading scorers from last year, Marina Mabry and Kennedy Carter. One's not even in the WNBA, and one's not there anymore, and she's requesting another trade to another team. So I think there was a lot of storylines that weren't basketball related last year for the Sky, and I think they can kind of push that aside and really go for the future here. And Reese is going to be a big part of that. And then I think also the MVP is up for grabs this year. That's another reason why I think Reese has a claim to get a couple of top votes. A'ja Wilson's insane, obviously, but she's won 3, but she's never won back-to-back. So she won last year, so she can't win this year, right? So that opens up the gate for a lot of players. I've already talked about Breanna Stewart a lot on previous shows about, coming off a long championship season, right? So I think that the MVP is up for grabs, and I think Angel Reese is in prime position to, claim some votes at least.
I agree. Reese had a really just historic rookie season any way you slice it. 13.6 points per game, 13.1 rebounds per game. She played just 34 regular season games because of her wrist injury, but she should be fully healthy for the start of the season. She was healthy for Unrivaled during the offseason. And she really last year, she proved herself as a professional caliber player, really a professional caliber superstar, after being selected at 7 overall. And I know that Cameron Brink was hurt for most of last season, so she probably would have factored into the Rookie of the Year race as well. But really, in any year that Caitlin Clark isn't a rookie, Angel Reese probably wins that Rookie of the Year award. So I could definitely see her making some inroads in the MVP voting, especially since this year feels a little bit more wide open than last year.
Yeah, and obviously I've talked about Stewart coming off the long championship season, but you don't feel the same. You have high expectations for Stewie this year, huh?
Yeah, this doesn't sound like bold predictions, but the sports books would disagree. Breanna Stewart to win MVP is plus 1,400 odds on FanDuel. They're much longer odds than DraftKings, which has her at plus 800. She won MVP in 2023, so this isn't the boldest prediction anyone's ever made, but she seems to be back to full health after offseason knee surgery. I've seen a lot of arguments about, are there too many mouths to feed in New York? And yes, the Liberty do definitely have a talented roster coming off of their championship, but they'll be playing without Benajelani Hamilton this year. Courtney Vandersloot is gone, and yes, the Liberty added Natasha Cloud, who I think at this point in time is probably a better guard than Courtney Vandersloot is, as well as Leonie Fiebich has shown a lot of promise. So I think that she'll help to fill in for Benige Laney Hamilton. But for as much as we are slightly fading Breanna Stewart in fantasy, I think that it's very, very possible that she is able to reach that upper gear again this year and really turn things on and get back into MVP consideration.
Yeah, obviously, I don't agree fully with this, but when you're talking about a former MVP getting plus 1,400 odds to win MVP in a year where I just said MVP is kind of wide open, I think that's a fair bet to take. Like, obviously, there's a reason why she's a long shot, but there's definitely a realm of possibility where maybe another injury happens in New York early, and Stewie just has to take over to will them to a top seed. Very within the realm of possibility. I'm going another Hail Mary here, but I'm sticking with the Liberty. I'm going Marine Johannes to win Sixth Player of the Year. She's plus 2,200. The favorites to win this award could all be regular starters, in my opinion. DraftKings lists Sophie Cunningham, Dewana Bonner, Carly Samuelson, and Leonie Fiebich. With the lowest odds, Cunningham, I'm expecting to come off the bench, but Dewana Bonner should start for the Fever. Carly Samuelson's probably going to get some starts. Leonie Fiebich is going to start because you just mentioned Laney Hamilton's injury. So even and Cunningham is the favorite, and she's plus 600. So again, this award is even way more wide open than MVP. And so I'm just going to take another dart throw. Johannes is incredible. She's one of my favorite players to watch. I would argue that when Johannes gets hot, her like entertainment factor, her buzz factor matches Caitlin Clark's buzz factor. Like, I obviously she doesn't have those moments as nearly as often. Caitlin Clark can do that on a daily basis. She's been doing that, but I'm just saying that's the type of player MJ is when she gets hot, and that's a lot of fun to have. I talked about Stewie maybe taking a step back. Natasha Cloud is a veteran. Jonquil Jones is a veteran. Sabrina Ionescu is probably going to take over. So I feel like they need the Liberty needed like a little jolt, right? They're coming off the championship. They're a good team. We all know they're a good team, but I feel like MJ can provide that little bit of a jolt, and that's exactly what Sixth Player of the Year, is, in my opinion. So maybe the voters will agree with me. I think if she's never really had the opportunity to play 20, 25 minutes a night for an extended stretch. We've seen like weeks where that's happened in the W. So if she can have that role for the entire season, I don't see why Marine Johannes can't win Sixth Player of the Year.
Yeah, and this award is always it's just such a toss-up. You look at last year, for example, Tiffany Hayes won the award. She was retired at the start of the regular season. So forgive anyone who didn't have Tiffany Hayes as their Sixth Player of the Year last year, but the year before that, it was Alicia Clark with the Aces as well. Brianna Jones before that, Kelsey Plum, and then Dearica Hamby won it twice. So I think that Johannes is the type of player who she hasn't put up those really flashy stat lines at the WNBA level, but she can really provide that spark off the bench. And she's proven herself on the international stage. And if the Liberty really, if they are dealing with like one more injury related absence throughout the season, Johannes is the type of player that could step up even if she might not take on a starting role. So I think that really bolsters her odds. That I think it would take a few injuries to have her see a starting role, but I think that she could really step up if they see even just one more injury.
Yeah, and you mentioned her starring on the international level. I talked at length on Monday about Eurobasket, so that's also a possibility here. Could eliminate a large chunk of her season, but maybe if the Liberty need her really badly, she doesn't need to go. But obviously, she's just such a fun player, and I think when you're looking at like a toss-up award like this, like what does Sixth Player of the Year mean to you, right? And to me, the sixth player is, it doesn't matter what position you play, you're the first player off the bench and you're going to provide a spark to your team. I think she can do that this year for sure.
Absolutely. And like you said, with it being such a toss-up award, why not take a player with long shot odds? We've talked at length about how many mouths there are to feed in New York, but why not Marine Johannes to step up in 2025 now that she's back in the WNBA? And then shifting to more of a fantasy standpoint, another kind of bold prediction that I have is that we'll see the first 2,000 fantasy point season under ESPN scoring standards. A'ja Wilson came very close last season with 1,911 fantasy points in a season in which she was named the unanimous MVP, and that was over just 40 games in a season. This year, there are 44 games on the schedule instead of 40, so it certainly seems achievable by someone, even if it isn't Wilson. It'd require a gargantuan fantasy effort with an average of over 45 fantasy points per game, assuming that a player plays in every matchup. But I do think that it could happen this year from one of the top fantasy options, whether it be Wilson, Clark, Stewart, Collier, maybe even Agumbawale or UNESCO. But I think that I would say that they're a little bit more long shot. But any of those top four, I could see really making a run at the mark.
Yeah, I would. My money would be on Caitlin Clark. I just think that I'll get to some of my bolder predictions with Caitlin Clark last year, but her passing, her assist numbers with this team, they should be through the roof, and that should kind of like break WNBA this season. Fantasy WNBA this season.
Absolutely. And the fact that she was able to get 8.4 assists last year with just how much the Fever generally struggled around her, I think that she'll just be able to take it out another notch this year.
Yeah, and when you look at like the assists per game leaders, as a rookie, she already established herself like in like the top 10 in like the history of the WNBA. So I think Caitlin Clark's, we talk about her deep 3-point shooting and all of that. But I think her assists and her playmaking is truly sensational and is what's going to be like breaking the game essentially this season. So turning from fantasy to gambling more, my bold prediction is I don't think the Seattle Storm make the playoffs. And apparently that's a really hot take. DraftKings has them as minus 500 to make the postseason, which is pretty good odds. They have basically 3 tiers here. So I'll just run through them quick. Tier 1 makes perfect sense. You got the Aces at minus 10,000, the Lynx at minus 8,000, the Fever at minus 8,000. And then the Liberty weren't even listed. Maybe it was a user error on my part, but I didn't see them listed. But that makes sense. All 4 of those teams should make the playoffs, barring catastrophic something catastrophic. Tier 2, they have Phoenix and Seattle. Phoenix is minus 550 and Seattle's minus 500. I'm kind of like, okay, so then where's everybody else at then? Tier 3 is Atlanta minus 200, Sparks minus 155, Chicago minus 125, and Dallas minus 110. I'd argue all 3 of Tier 3 has a better chance to make the playoffs than Seattle this year. I think Seattle and Phoenix are 2 teams that are kind of in flux. They've been at the top of the standings for a long time now. They've had new players, not necessarily like they're good players. But I like a lot of players on Phoenix and Seattle, but I just think that these types of players haven't played together yet. They're in flux. There's a lot of things that could go wrong here. Whereas you look at Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, the Sparks, even when they get Brink back, all 4 of those teams are younger teams centered around younger players that have a future. So I think those 4 teams, like when push comes to shove, they'll just be happy to get into the playoffs and get that 8th seed. I could see a team like Seattle struggling out of the gate. And then, Skylar Diggins is like, well, if we're not going to be a top 3 seed, like, what's the point? Like, I'm a veteran. I'm here for championships. I just could see a lot of things going wrong in Phoenix and Seattle, whereas those other teams, they're young, and I just like them more. So I think Phoenix does make the playoffs, but I don't think Seattle does.
Yeah, I think I'm a little higher on both teams than you are, but I think that there is a very real possibility with both teams that they wind up missing the playoffs. The Mercury are playing without Diana Taurasi for the first time in the last 2 decades. So even though they do have a lot of strong pieces like Kalia Copper, they added Satu Sabali and Alyssa Thomas as well. A lot of their success seems to hinge on whether Satu Sabali can stay healthy, which, as we've talked about on the show, has been an issue in the past. And I think that they do have the talent that they should at least make it into the playoffs in my book. But yeah, like things are kind of running by more of a thread that I don't love their odds at minus 550 and minus 500 respectively, because like you said, a lot of these players are veterans. So what happens if they do struggle? Do some of them start to like maybe ask to go to a contender or just like start to look toward next year a little bit more? And I think that just in general, the parity gap in the WNBA is shrinking. You still do have those top tier teams like the Aces, the Liberty, the Lynx, now kind of the Fever as well, although they're kind of in a prove it season to make sure that they can do it as a team. But you look at the Dream and they have a lot of really strong players, especially after adding Brianna Jones and Brittany Griner during the offseason. The Sparks we've mentioned a lot. Especially once Cameron Brink is healthy, they have a lot of star power on that team. And Kelsey Plum is that veteran presence that I think will be able to put them over the top this year. Chicago is a team on the rise, and they have really two veteran guards now in Ariel Atkins and Courtney Vandersloot returning to Chicago. And the Wings I had last year as like I think my number 5 or number 6 teams when we did this show. Um, and obviously that didn't pan out. They finished with the second worst record in the league, but they had a lot of talent last year. And obviously they lost Satu Sabali during the offseason. They lost Natasha Howard, but Paige Beckers is a huge addition who I think will be able to make a major impact during the season. Even Dejanay Carrington in the backcourt, I think is getting overlooked a lot. You have Agumba Wale and you have Beckers who are going to be very, very productive. But Dejanay Carrington has really proven her ability to stand out, even among some talented backcourts like she did in Connecticut. And I think that there are a lot of players who just have the potential to bounce back. And I think it could be a big year for Dallas.
Yeah, and you kind of said what I forgot to say, where like obviously those Atlanta, Los Angeles, Chicago, Dallas, they've made additions, they've made changes, but I just think those changes make way more sense than bringing in Sabali, and an injury-prone player and match her with Alyssa Thomas and match her with Clea Copper. Like in theory, yeah, get all these great players together and have them play, but they still got to work together on the court. And basketball is a team sport. I just think if I was setting the odds, there would be 3 tiers, and it would be those top 4 teams, basically everybody else, and then Washington, Golden State, and they have those teams at the bottom. But it's just interesting to see Seattle and Phoenix up there, and I think it just probably has to do with that star power that they do have. But it's going to be interesting. You said Dallas was your team to watch last year. Atlanta was my team to watch. Different injuries and things, didn't help those come to fruition. But essentially, they kind of just have retooled, brought in a piece here or there, and they got the same star players as they did last year. And we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm. And also, for what it's worth, I feel like from looking at some of the sportsbook over/under wins lines, I know this is getting a little bit off track with more sports betting content. It feels like the sportsbooks might still be projecting the win totals under a 40-game season instead of a 44-game season. The highest win total,
This
I
is
believe.
what I'm telling you, people. This is what I'm telling you. Jason is the WNBA expert, guys. He's the head of the sportsbooks.
Yeah, even with the Liberty have the highest total on FanDuel is where I was looking at 32.5, but you have several other teams at 30.5, which are the Fever are at 30.5, as are the Lynx and the Aces. It feels like all of those teams could hit the over on that. And you look at, for example, Golden State, their over under for win total is at 8.5. If you bet the over, I believe it's at plus 100 or plus 110. And I know we've been very critical of the Valkyries on this show. I think that there are a lot of pieces on their team that will pan out more in the future than they will this year. But you look at last season, and the lowest win total was at 8 games under a 40-game season. And if every team is healthy, I think that the Valkyries would struggle to hit 9 wins. But like weird things happen in the WNBA. You get enough like wins on those just weird Wednesday afternoon like the camp games and stuff. I think that they could very well make their way to double-digit wins, because it feels like it'll be harder for them to lose, 36 games than it is to win 9 games, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you're onto something here. The Liberty won 32 games last year, and there's more games this season. So that's kind of crazy. I'm gonna have to take a closer look after this show and put in some future bets if that's the case.
Yeah, for sure. If there's a team that you like out there, seriously consider betting the over on their win total because I think there might be some value out there.
The
And then,
sky's at 19 right now. That's crazy. That's crazy.
yeah, it feels like they're a team that could definitely go at least like flirt with 500 and
Yeah,
like
that's 22
21,
wins.
22
Yeah,
games feels very attainable for them.
for sure.
Yeah, and then Aneesah Morrow at plus 3,500 to win Rookie of the Year is intriguing for me this year. I think it hinges on a couple of different risk factors, namely her getting healthy sooner rather than later. She's dealing with a knee injury right now, and we don't know yet whether she'll be ready for the start of the regular season. She was dominant throughout her college career, and while there are some size concerns at the professional level, she'll have an elite mentor in Tina Charles, who's one of the premier front court players in WNBA history. I haven't really seen Morrow's name mentioned much in Rookie of the Year conversations, which makes sense given the likelihood that Beckers will win it, or if something catastrophic happens, then maybe Dominique Malanga or Sonia Citrone. But I think that Morrow at least deserves some consideration, especially given the plus 3,500 odds, because the Sun are expected to be one of the worst teams in the WNBA. They're right down there with the Valkyries in terms of win projections and playoff chances and championship chances. But I think that Morrow is someone who really could wind up stepping up for the Sun if she winds up getting healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, looking at the Rookie of the Year race, it's going to be hard for any of those rookies on bad teams. I know they're going to get a lot of minutes and they probably could have a lot of production for them to win Rookie of the Year over a player like Paige, because like I said, I think Dallas makes the postseason. I think they're a good team. And if she's healthy the whole season, she's just going to run away with it as a starter on a good team. So that's where I kind of lean on the Rookie of the Year. But yeah, I think there's a lot of value because I think we talked about like pumping the brakes on rookies because last year, like the star power that came out, I think there's going to be a lot of solid rookies this year that have fantasy relevance, ups and ebbs and flows where, now they're playing a lot of minutes, like Kiki Irfin, like in Washington right now. I think she could start, and play heavy minutes, but then Shakira Austin, Aaliyah Edwards comes back and things like that happen. I think there's going to be some solid rookies this year, but it's going to be hard for any of them to match Paige, even Dominique, like really high on Dominique, but I don't know if she is going to have enough, playing time and production to match Paige who's going to be playing like as a starter every game.
Yeah, I think that Beckers not only has the clear-cut top talent in the class, obviously at number one overall, but I think that she has the most opportunity to make like a clear impact in year one. She's going to be
On
a
a good
clear
team.
starter.
On a good
Exactly.
team too.
Yeah. Yeah, she'll have a lot of talent around her, so she won't be getting like bottled up in the looks because otherwise she'll be able to dish it out to Arike and she'll be able to run up the score. And with like even Dominique Malanga, she's considered one of the most like physically gifted rookies out there. We've seen what she can do overseas, and they did a GM survey this week where um, out of the rookie class, I think the majority of GMs said that they would prefer Dominique Malanga over everyone else. I don't know if I agree quite with that over Beckers, but it shows just the regard for that opposing GMs have for her. But even this year, I don't think that she'll have a starting role, at least to begin the season in Seattle. And this could just kind of be a learning curve year for her. So Beckers is at minus 350 for Rookie of the Year, which I don't love for a futures bet, like given the fact that things can happen. Beckers does have an injury history, and obviously we hope that she stays healthy this year, but I don't love her odds at minus 350. I'm probably steering clear of Rookie of the Year overall, but if I'm looking for a long shot value to just sprinkle a few units at, I think that Aneesah Morrow is someone who could provide some value.
That makes sense. The only thing I would add to the Dominique GM conversation is it's a lot easier for GMs to say that nonsense when they don't have to actually make that pick. Like, yeah, sure, you can make the argument that Dominique has a higher upside, but if you have that number one overall pick, there's no way you're taking Dominique over Paige. And I've been super high on Dominique since I saw that video of her dunking when she was 15, so like that's coming from a super fan, but like you still take Paige number one.
Right. And we mentioned that Aneesah Morrow is dealing with an early season injury. Speaking of other early season injuries, there are already several absences around the league that should impact the fantasy landscape. The first is Shakira Austin and Aaliyah Edwards will both be sidelined for Friday's regular season opener against the Dream. Who are some players that you think could step up in their absences?
Yeah, well, I think you just look at Stephanie Dolson. She slides over to center, and she should, see a lot of extra shot attempts and a lot of rebounds from that position. I think I'm fine streaming or starting Citrone, Irifin, or Emily Engsler tonight if you have an open spot. But I think those are like quote unquote like risky plays. By like they're. You can't count on production, but if they do get hot, that you could see a 25 plus point ESPN night, or fantasy ESPN night. But it's just tough when you look at a situation like this. You Jade Melbourne, Sugg Sutton. There's just a lot of names, and when there's a lot of names, you probably want to steer shy and just stick with the known commodities, which is Brittany Sykes and Stephanie Dolson.
Yeah, I think that if you're in a deep league and looking for some value, there are maybe some players like the Shug Suttons of the world and the Jade Melbournes who could step up on like a one-game in a one-game capacity, where if you have a streaming spot already, it might be worth picking them up. But I'm probably steering clear of most of the players, even with Shakira Austin and Aaliyah Edwards out. And then in a somewhat surprising development, the Lynx will have some early season absences, including Kayla McBride, who has already been ruled out, and Alana Smith, who is doubtful. She participated in this morning's morning shoot around, but it still seems likely that she'll miss today's game at least due to a quad injury. Austin and Edwards from the Mystics seemed possible to miss time to begin the regular season, but I'm pretty surprised by these Lynx absences. And you couple that with the fact that Dorka Juhas will be unavailable this year, and I think that Friday's game between the Lynx and Wings could actually get quite entertaining. From a fantasy standpoint, with McBride and Smith likely to be sidelined, I'm expecting big nights from Courtney Williams and Natisha Heidemann in the backcourt, while Bridget Carlton, Jessica Shepard, and Carly Samuelson should have opportunities to step up alongside Nafisa Collier in the front court. Now, Williams and Heidemann are more of those players who are like, they're going to be rostered in most fantasy leagues that you're in, so they're probably not available. They're just like more of must start options, as opposed to like if you had some other guards who might usually be ranked above them. I think that they should definitely be in lineups tonight. Carlton, Shepard, and Samuelson, depending on the size of your league, might still be available. So it could be worth looking on your waiver wire to see if they're still available. Carlton and Shepard especially, I think, could maintain starting roles throughout the regular season, at least one of the two. And then Carly Samuelson, she showed a lot of promise last year in Washington. But even if she comes off the bench, I think that if you're in like a 10-team league and you have Carly Samuelson available on your bench, I think that she could provide value throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Carlton, Shepard, and Samuelson are all candidates that I was looking at to stream this morning. And when we're talking about streaming, guys, like some leagues, I think you get like 6 moves per week or something along those lines. You really got to take advantage of those and fill opening spots. Some days you'll have, there'll be 4 or 5 games on a day, and your full starting lineup will be filled out. But on days where it's not, streaming and getting a player in there that can give you, even if it's 15 points, goes a long way when you're adding up points at the end of the week.
Yeah, and this opening week, because it's from Friday today until not this Sunday, but the following Sunday, I think you get up to 10 additions. So even though it's still early in the season, obviously, it's important to use all of those like waiver claims if you have them, just to bump up the points. As a reminder, ESPN does not have any negative scoring categories under their standard scoring projections. So a player like Caitlin Clark, even though she struggled with turnovers a lot last year, there is no chance that anyone is going to get you less than 0 points. So there is no downside to adding a player if you're on the edge about it. And it can usually be beneficial to do so earlier rather than later, because sometimes you'll get to the end of a week and there's a slate in which there are 5 or 6 games on that given night toward the end of the week, like on a Saturday or Sunday, and then you just don't really have room to make those pickups. So on the nights when there are like 2 or 3 games, it might be worth looking at who's available on your waiver wire who could step up, and also like with the players that you're dropping, if you think you might want to keep them, you can see whether their next game is within like the net is outside of the next 2 days, because then you could re-add them on the waiver wire as well. And then finally, the Sparks made a somewhat surprising move by parting ways with Ari McDonald this week. So I think that Odyssey Sims should have a chance to take on a starting role. And she's someone that I definitely now have on my fantasy radar, especially at least over the first few weeks of the season.
Yeah, I think Ray Burrell is also a candidate here. RotoWire, me and you are projecting Odyssey Sims to draw the start here. Underdog has Burrell drawing the start for whatever you want to take that into consideration. But yeah, with McDonald out, there's going to be a player to step up. This might be a situation where they each play 20 minutes regardless of who starts. But keep an eye on Burrell and Sims for sure.
Yeah, and even if they wind up like trading starts on occasion, I think that both Sims and Burrell are some of those players who, to begin training camp, they weren't necessarily on the fantasy radar, but now they could provide some fantasy value, especially if you're in like we've said, one of those 10-team leagues where there isn't much available on the waiver wire. It could be worth exploring Sims or Burrell. And then to close out the show, let's put odds aside and give our picks for the season. So, what do you think that the WNBA Finals matchup will be, and who's your champion?
I'm taking the Fever over the Lynx. I think, you look at last season, and I just think it's going to be hard for the Aces and the Liberty to be as good as they have been in previous seasons. I think there's some changes there. It's going to take a while for them to reach their peak. I think Minnesota is going to be hungry after not winning the title. I think the Fever are going to be, they have to prove it still, right? They brought in a new head coach. They brought in all these additions. They still have to prove it. I think the Fever and the Lynx, the hungry dog runs faster sort of thing. Like these two teams still have a lot to prove if they want to get like right now, the sports books, us talking heads, we all are putting the Fever and the Lynx on the same level as the Liberty and the Aces, right? But like the Liberty and the Aces have been doing it for the last 3-4 years. The Fever and the Lynx still need to do that. So I think they're going to be hungry. I think they're going to be ready to prove themselves. And I think we're going to be ushering in a new era of WNBA ball with this championship and Caitlin Clark taking it home in year 2. I also have her winning the MVP. So could, if she wins both of those in year 2, it's going to be a long, long career for Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, I have the same matchup, but I have a different outcome. I'm picking Lynx over Fever. I think that Indiana, I think that they'll basically have a nationwide home court advantage because everyone in every WNBA city and really WNBA region slash state like wants to come out and see Caitlin Clark. So they have a lot of support no matter where they go. And in addition to that, they have a revamped front office this year that features Stephanie White as their head coach and a new roster that added a lot of really strong pieces. And I think that'll be enough to bring the Fever to the finals. But I think this will be Minnesota's year. And I think that Indiana is still just a few years away. You mentioned Clark as your MVP with your champion. My MVP also comes from my champion, and it's Napheesa Collier. I know that in past years, you've been really high on Napheesa Collier as an MVP candidate. She was dominant and unrivaled during the offseason, and I think it's her time to win a WNBA MVP award. She won the MVP in Unrivaled, so that was really encouraging, and I think that she'll be able to lead this team, and I think that voters are like will kind of be ready to give her due. Uh, I felt like we saw that a little bit with Defensive Player of the Year voting last year, where Nafisa Collier won it. I don't know for sure whether she was actually the most the most dominant defender last year, because Asia Wilson was out there and she was dominant. But with Wilson, she won the MVP award. She had also won the Defensive Player of the Year the previous 2 seasons. So I think that there was a little bit of voter fatigue there. And I think that the voters really just wanted to give Collier some sort of due because she had a fantastic season. And I think that this year, she'll really be able to take that final step and become an actual MVP.
I like it. She just moved up in the standings. So normally she was like fourth or fifth. Now she's top three. So hey, I gotta move. So once the consensus reaches my hot takes, I gotta find a new hot take.
Absolutely. That does it for today's show. We'll be back Monday at 1 p.m. Central, breaking down the first weekend of action around the WNBA and offering some of the first waiver recommendations of the season. Be sure to tune in then, and thanks for watching.